We dive into a full game preview of the Baltimore Ravens Week 5 matchup with the Cincinnati Bengals on Sunday Night Football coming up next here on Locked On Ravens with a very special guest.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Ravens podcast, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostrecker of Ravens Wire. Of course, we are here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for tuning in here, making us your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. That includes over in video form on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And we're back here. The Ravens have an opportunity to pick up a win, a big divisional win against the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 5. We'll be previewing that game here today. And here to do it with me is former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver and Super Bowl champion, of course, Qadry Ismail. And Q, I know the Ravens, they should be 4-0 right now. A tough loss to Buffalo in Week 4, 23-20. And 2-2, it's okay, but I think it's a bit disappointing how they've gotten there.
So it's so weird because, here we sit and we're talking, Ravens and the way in which their season is kind of started. And the one thing that keeps coming to mind, you are what your record says you are. They're a 500 team. And you can slice it and dice it. Well, if the Dolphins game, if they would have, just had one stop, or if the offense could have produced, just one more score, or, the Dolphins coulda, woulda, shoulda. But then you go into the Bills game and there was opportunity there. And I can't believe, you gave up a huge lead. And, again, this is where it's coaching or it's execution, with the players. It doesn't really matter. The bottom line is that you got to own your record. And I think Bill Parcells, the famous National Football League coach who was known for his time at the Cowboys for a short period of time, but the Giants, more importantly, he would say, yeah, you are what your record says you are. So, I just think that ultimately when you look at, what is going on with this ball club, there's a lot that has to be figured out, and it has to be figured out soon if they want to get to where they feel they can get into the postseason.
Right, in that Buffalo loss, a couple things stand out. There's obviously the fact that the Ravens were up 20-3. They blow that 17-point lead. There's also the fact that the Ravens offense didn't score in the second half. No points overall for them. There's also the referees doing their referee thing. There's John Harbaugh's fourth down decision. But what were your overall takeaways from this game? Because also, Q, Lamar Jackson, it was by far his worst game of the year as well.
Yeah, it's an odd game because I think – when it came to starting off, you started off so incredibly strong. And I love the way that, heck, even Marlon Humphreys, he was right on the spot and making sure that, there was opportunity to not only pick the ball off, but the way he was running after the catch or after the interception, rather, I thought that was tremendous. Now, when I look at, again, the way in which they were kind of going about their business, I don't know. I know it's difficult at times to create interceptions and turnovers, but when you have gifts right there and you don't take advantage of them, to me, I think that spells trouble. And I think there were times where in points of the game where the defense just didn't take advantage of what Josh Allen and company was doing against them. I thought that was a game of misses more than a game of makes.
And I know, there's the Patrick Queen interception. He drops an interception for the second week in a row, which would have been a big one. Obviously, there are a couple other plays you can look towards. The Rashad Bateman play where Lamar Jackson throws it, and the ball was a little bit out there, and Bateman, it glances off his fingertips. And I know Bateman had a couple other drops. We'll talk about him in the second segment. But Q, the Ravens continue to add reinforcements, I would say, to their team. They signed Andy Isabella, the wide receiver from the Cardinals, to their practice squad, former second rounder in that 2019 class. So the Ravens move off of Hollywood Brown, who was a first rounder in that draft. They bring in now Isabella, has 3 touchdowns, a 4.31 40-yard dash at the combine. So you're banking on potential there. But the Ravens do sign A.J. Klein, the linebacker, off of the New York Giants practice squad. So we got the Ravens and Giants just flip-flopping players, it seems like, all the time. And this is a player that is versatile, can play inside, can play outside as well. I know that a lot was spoken of that over the course of yesterday during media availability and what he can bring. So, Q, when you talk about these two positions, wide receiver and linebacker, maybe Isabella makes an impact late in the season when he gets acclimated to the offense. But it seems like A.J. Klein could be a player that is a play now guy.
Yeah, and I'm hoping he is. It's interesting. I like their depth, but it could always be improved. And let me just go ahead and look right here. I just look at what they're doing, and I think I don't know, Patrick Queen, Josh Bynes, both guys have shown some really good bright spots, but then there's also some letdowns that I look at and I'm like, yeah, I wish they had that opportunity to really um, just make some dynamic plays. I know Adafe Owe and Jason Pierre-Paul. I mean, even though they're listed as linebackers, they're more of just pressuring the quarterback and getting after the quarterback, which then affords them to bring in just different safety looks. But I think the overall thing for me when I look at this defense, yeah, you got to bring in guys that you feel can really just establish themselves. And I'm hoping that this signing is an establishment type of an assignment where you just see some of these other linebackers, they're just guys, and they're not able to make the necessary plays that you just need if you're going to be winning games and talking about playoffs.
Right. And overall, when there's a game like this where you lose to Buffalo, you want to assess where your roster is. And they went out of this game with a couple injuries. I mean, Bateman does get injured, and so far 2 practices for him where he has not been able to practice on Wednesday and Thursday. So Isabella, I'm not so sure he'd be the call up on Sunday if Bateman's unable to go. I think maybe that's more Bailey Gaither. But yeah, you mentioned that the positional depth at inside linebacker, or just I'll say linebacker right now, it was a bit surprising to me when they initially put their roster together because of the safety looks you were talking about, where you don't necessarily have to have 2 inside linebackers on the field at all times because you have that depth of Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton and Chuck Clark over at safety. So I think Klein is a player that, again, the Ravens love their versatility in their players. They like guys who can line up at multiple different spots on the field, and Klein can certainly do that. So we'll see what he's going to be able to do. And for Isabella, again, I think this is just more of a potential play, but someone who, again, was a pick, a second rounder in 2019. So definitely there's still some potential, some untapped, hopefully, for Baltimore left there. But Q, there have been a ton of questions, a ton of discourse about John Harbaugh over the past couple of days here, even dating back a little longer than that. There's been some talk about his decision. Obviously, personally, I would have kicked the field goal there. I know there are others who would have gone for it still. And I see both sides, absolutely. But we do have a question here talking about John Harbaugh from Jamal X, who says the Ravens have 2 playoff wins in the past 10 years. With the team not being able to finish with all the defensive talent, is it time for a coaching change? And I know there has been that conversation. Do the Ravens need a new face, a new leader, etc.? There's been a lot of that conversation, especially after, I'd say, the disappointing way they've gotten to 2-2 so far. But you cannot take away the fact that, look, John Harbaugh has had a successful regular season record with this team. Maybe there's a bit to be desired in the playoffs recently. I know the early part of his career was very good in terms of playoff success. But where are you in terms of the Ravens and their coaching staff, Q? Do you think that through week 4 of 2022, Baltimore needs a coaching change right now?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't. I'm of the mindset that Steve Bisciotti has always talked about his fascination with the stability of ownership and leadership and coaching when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Modeled his organization after that model where they don't listen to the outside people. They are locked in, focused on what goes on in between the doors of the building. And I think for John Harbaugh, I go back to earlier in the week, Jimmy Smith, the Ravens' former first round draft choice, who played multiple years won a Super Bowl, made a significant and phenomenal play to seal the Super Bowl victory against Michael Crabtree, who would later become a Raven. But I think for Jimmy, one of the things he said, and this is a guy who's recently on the team. I like the way John Harbaugh, treated me, and he is a really strong coach. And to me, I'm like, wow, this is one of the guys who, is looked at as one of the franchise guys. Um, yeah, he had high praise and high respect for who John Harbaugh is and was as a coach to him. I think the fact that he changes it up and is not just the same old speaks volumes to who John Harbaugh is. Always willing to change and adapt if needed, to connect better with the players. And I think that is where, you don't see the quit. You don't see the sloppy play. Sure, you're no question about it. 5-game losing streak at home is not cool. The standard of making the playoffs is, it's every year. That's the level of expectation. Does he have a talented roster? Sure. So all those things, points to like you better step up. But I think at the same time, when it comes to stepping up, I think that he does a fine job of leading these men.
Yeah, and look, we're so early on into this year. We're only a month in. There is still plenty of time for this Ravens team to turn the ship around, for John Harbaugh to, again, lead these men, lead his players. And I think, again, he's done a great job of that, but he does have to be held accountable in some circumstances for some of the coaching decisions and other stuff. It's not like he is on a pedestal and he can't be touched, right? But there is also the fact that he has had consistent success. He has really put his stamp on the organization. And while obviously that's not the be all end all, like when you need a change and stuff isn't going right, you need the change, and you can't just have a guy with a complacency factor. I've talked about it before. That's not something you want. But I think for right now, it's just too early in the season for the Ravens to undergo a coaching change. I understand the frustration. I get it. Don't get me wrong. But I still think there's plenty of time for Baltimore to turn the ship around. Absolutely. And coming up in the second segment, we'll be diving into how they can do that in their Week 5 matchup with the Cincinnati Bengals. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about SimpliSafe. And here's a sports analogy for you. When it comes to burglars, your home is like the end zone. And you need the absolute strongest defense you can muster. This is why so many people use and trust SimpliSafe home security. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. It's cutting-edge technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back, so you always know your home is safe. And there are so many things that SimpliSafe can do for you. Again, your home safety does come first, whether that is preventing a break-in, and also they have very effective technology that helps in many different ways. 24/7 professional monitoring, SimpliSafe agents call you the moment a threat is detected and dispatch police or first responders in an emergency, even if you're not home or can't be reached. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL. Save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. We're back here with our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allstreicher still here with Qadry Ismail and Q. This is a big matchup. Week 5, prime time, under the light, Sunday Night Football at home. You mentioned the Ravens, their 5-game losing streak at home dating back to last season. This is a big opportunity not only to get back on track, but get back on track against the team that demolished the Ravens twice in 2021. And now the teams are looking different on both sides. I mean, you talk about the Ravens offense, which we'll get into now. The Ravens leading passer in the Ravens last matchup with Cincinnati was Josh Johnson. The Ravens leading rusher in that game was the one and only Devonta Freeman, who was a king in Baltimore, by the way. But now you have Lamar Jackson back, who is obviously in the midst of what I still think is an MVP campaign. J.K. Dobbins getting up to speed with things. Justice Hill, if he doesn't play, big loss, definitely a big loss. But with Jackson's game cue in Buffalo or against Buffalo on Sunday in Week 4, there were some decisions that weren't great, some throws that weren't great. It was not his best game. It wasn't execution-wise. So how do you think Lamar Jackson can get back on track against this Cincinnati defense that does boast some talent in their secondary, but in the course of the 4 games this year, Q, their pass defense is actually a top 10 unit, allowing 5.9 yards per attempt?
I think when you look at this overall matchup, I think one thing that stands out to me is the fact that There's talent that is just on. It's on a matchup basis, and I think the advantage for the matchup goes to Cincinnati. I think that's what scares me about when you look at the way in which whether it be Marlon Humphreys, and we talked about last year. You talk about Jamar Chase. Holy mother of pearl! I mean, he put on a clinic. His yards after catch was just phenomenal. Look at Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd is a first down making machine. The dude is just all over the field when it comes to just finding the hole in the defense and exploiting it. You have to if Devontae Parker is a guy compared to Higgins, Boyd, and Jamar Chase. You can't just show up and think that you can just show up against this Bengals ball club. I think that they're hitting their stride. I think that they're a dangerous football team, and I think this is something that, from an overall standpoint, it scares me. To be perfectly honest with you, it scares me. I think that this matchup is arguably the toughest one that the Ravens face and will face this entire year.
Yeah, and in terms of Lamar, I mean, you're looking at a guy that might not have Rashad Bateman in this game, so you're kind of moving everybody up a rung on the ladder here with Devin Duvernay coming in is your one, and then I guess it'd be Demarcus Robinson is your two, and then kind of filtering in from there. So I think for Lamar, compared to what we saw against Buffalo last week, I think for one, the weather is going to be better. So that's one area where I think will just be an advantage for him anyway. But it's the ability for him to continue to push the ball down the field, which I know the Ravens have made an emphasis of doing this year, but we didn't see those big plays on Sunday against Buffalo. We didn't really see them. And the Bills, credit to their defense, did a good job of doing that. Their linebackers are outstanding. They were depleted in the secondary, but they were still able to force Lamar into 2 interceptions. They got some pressure as well. So it's going to be big, but I do want to kind of stay on the wide receiver point, Q, because Rashad Bateman gets injured in that game and is seen leaving the stadium in a boot and is not practiced both on Wednesday or on Thursday. So unless he's able to log a practice on Friday, at least a limited session, it seems pretty unlikely he's going to suit up in this game. So I mentioned it, you now have Mark Andrews is still the number one pass catcher, undoubtedly. Devin Duvernay, Demarcus Robinson, James Prochet, Tylan Wallace, maybe a practice squad call-up like Riley Webb or Bailey Gaither. How confident are you in that group going up against Cincinnati's 10th ranked pass defense?
I am cautiously optimistic. I think Duvernay, he's going to be ready for the primetime lights. I think Mark Andrews, man, the only person that's stopping Mark is Mark. I think both he and Lamar, they've proven time and time again, it really doesn't matter what you do against us. 9 times out of 10, we're going to win. I do feel, though, that you're right. You can kind of scheme it where you can get a Mark Andrews, in other words, double him or pass him off to another guy, and it's hard for Lamar to get into a rhythm with him in key situations. And so that means that someone else is going to have to step up. And I think Robinson, is the logical next choice. I don't think Duvernay would shrink back from this opportunity if Bateman doesn't go, and it looks like he's not. It could be one of those scenarios where, they feel like, hey, whatever, a 50% Bateman is better than 100% Robinson. I don't know. But I do know this, that regardless, Lamar is going to need some of his pass catchers to be on point, to really go out there and show up. That's just the bottom line. They got to show up. Think about it. Joe Burrow, has a trio. Plus, he also has former Raven Hayden Hurst. And so, you got the entire field you have to defend. There's no letting up. And I think at the same time for Lamar, he needs that opportunity as well. Isaiah Likely, I've been high on him since literally the first preseason game, and he has shown up. But this is a great opportunity for him to really put on his big boy pants and make some of those explosive plays that we saw in the preseason. That's going to be an opportunity to offset the potential loss of Bateman.
And I've always said, Q, it all starts up front for an offense, whether you have a talented quarterback, running back, wide receivers, tight ends, you got to block for them. And if you don't block for them, bad stuff is going to happen. And the Ravens could be getting back one of their key players for the first time in a while here in Ronnie Stanley. Now, it seems like, Q, with these injured players coming back from their 2021 thing, so Marcus Peters, J.K. Dobbins, now Stanley, it seems like there's 1 week where they're really close but don't suit up, and then the next week they're playing. Well, it seemed like for Stanley, that really close week was Buffalo in week 4. He's practiced fully these 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday. So Friday's availability obviously going to be a big point for him in terms of if he can do maybe all 3 days full this week. But assuming Stanley does play, let's just say it happens, he's going to be in there at left tackle. What do you do at right tackle? Daniel Faalele impressed at the left tackle position, and obviously all things considered, considering he never played the position before. I mean, credit to him for what he was able to do over these first couple games of his NFL career. But you signed Morgan Moses to a 3-year, $15 million deal. I'd say he's been average so far. Do you put in Daniel Faalele at right tackle and trust him over on that side, or do you stick with the veteran in Morgan Moses, assuming Stanley plays 100% of snaps and is active on Sunday night?
Well, I guess if I was the agent of number 93 for the Buffalo Bills, I think I'd be calling up Buffalo, be like, hey, Bryant just made an amazing play against the Ravens to help us secure this victory. Yeah, I think we need to talk like contract extension. And then I think for Bryant, he needs to go ahead and make a personal call to Moses and be like, yo, bro, they gave me my bag. Appreciate you. Great job. Keep it up. Next time we meet, if we meet in the playoffs, I expect the same thing for you to go ahead and just be average and allow me to get by you so I can blow up the backfield. Everybody's going to be seeing that. I think this is a game where Moses, if he feels he's that upper tier guy, he has to come back, has to be that guy that is like, that's not me. What you saw on tape wasn't me. What I need to do is literally go out there and just ball out and show you, me, and the rest of Raven Nation that he was deserving of being picked up by the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, and I think that the Ravens, look, Falele's been great. And I don't know if the Ravens are going to go to the extent if Stanley's active to bench Morgan Moses in this situation. I don't even know if Stanley's out there, if he's going to play 100% of snaps at left tackle. Now, I would assume he would. Cincinnati has a couple of pretty nice pass rushers. Trey Hendrickson obviously gave Alejandro Villanueva his lunch money over and over and over again last year. It was
he's having nightmares even to this day. He don't even play anymore.
Yeah, so Trey Hendrickson gave Baltimore a lot of issues. Sam Hubbard on the other side there. So, again, that's a decently fearsome pass rush duo. DJ Reader's not going to be in this one. He's on IR, so I think that's advantaged Tyler Linderbaum. I think that would have given Linderbaum some issues. So, hopefully for Baltimore, their offensive line can be able to give Lamar Jackson this running game, some protection here. And I think for, again, Cincinnati's defense, while they are 10th in net yards per attempt, through the air, they are better on the ground. They have given up 3.8 yards per carry this year. That's 7th in the entire NFL. So if this is a game for J.K. Dobbins, the breakout, it'd be a really good time.
J.K. Dobbins makes such the difference when it comes to the running game, period. And I'm telling you, like his vision, his feet, his footwork, like there is something literally to be said about having J.K. Dobbins back. I mean, it is, bully ball still needs to really be back in force. And I think that will happen when you get, Gus the bus. But JK, it's oh my goodness. He's been such a huge bright spot for what the Ravens are trying to do as far as just rushing the ball. He is a difference maker.
And J.K. Dobbins does make quite the difference. And when you're looking at a run game that we didn't see the Kenyon Drake of the world do well, the Mike Davises of the world do well. You want to have that sure, steady hand that you can hand the ball to. And look, we've seen some of the explosiveness of J.K. Dobbins early on. We've seen some of it. So hopefully we can continue to see the ascension, the workload increase, and especially with Justice Hill maybe not playing in this one, seems pretty unlikely at this point. He'll be able to take some of the load there. Coming up here in our final segment, though, we'll be diving into the defensive side of the ball for the Ravens, how they can stop Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and that Bengals offense. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on the show. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is the number one source for football betting info this season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your number continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check out all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to BetOnline.net or use mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. We return our final segment here of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Qadry Ismail. And Q, if you want a number for this Baltimore Ravens team, I'll give you one. It's 23. Baltimore is the 23rd ranked pass defense. They're the 23rd ranked rush defense. They are 23 in both those categories. Much better than last week when we were talking when they were 31 in pass defense. So they got a little better there. But coming to town is Joe Burrow, is Jamar Chase, is T. Higgins, and that Bengals offense, which honestly has not been as high powered as people were expecting heading into the season, but they do have 2 straight wins here. Cincinnati's rush offense has been abysmal so far. Joe Mixon averaging just 2.7 yards per carry. So I think one of my keys is if you can eliminate the run game, if you can not have that be a worry for your defense, you can focus more resources on containing Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and that passing offense while keeping everything in front of you and being able to play maybe too high and not have those big plays get past you.
Yeah, I think if you have guys like a Travis Jones really being disruptive, I think it helps. I think at the same time, Matabike, like you said, Washington, I think those guys up front really is going to dictate a lot as far as even collapse in the pocket. That's going to go a long, long way. I think what we saw, we kind of gave you a little bit of hope. The fact that you didn't really see a big play in the running game. You did see, a forced fumble up until that point. The Buffalo Bills running attack was extremely complimentary. They did an amazing job of really being productive and, forcing teams to have that extra safety in the box. But you're right. If that front five can really handle what they need to on the front end, I think on the back end is going to really give, let's just say, that cover 2 look where you have that safety help. The safeties are going to need to be helping out, and I think that is going to be really important if, in fact, that you don't have to worry about committing that extra guy to the box.
And this Ravens defense, Q, is no secret. It's been a turnover defense this year. And that's a very nice thing to see compared to last year where Baltimore was in the bottom 5 in a lot of turnover categories. And guys like Marlon Humphrey playing at a super high level is going to be, I think, really important, especially against Jamar Chase, who in that first matchup in 2021 went for 201 yards. Joe Burrow in the second matchup threw for 525 yards. But again, this is a different team. Peters didn't play. Also, I think when you're looking at what the Ravens have pass rush wise, you mentioned some of the pressure that the Ravens will have to get. Odafe Owe has a sack last week and also forces a fumble. I think he should continue to build on that, hopefully. But Jason Pierre-Paul is going to have to step up. It doesn't seem like, again, Justin Houston's going to be able to play in this game after his strong start. Yeah. So you're hoping for guys maybe like Brandon Copeland, also maybe a practice squad call-up you can put. Maybe AJ Klein does get some reps at outside linebacker. Same thing with Malik Harrison. But interior-wise, yeah, just Matabike and Calais Campbell and all those other guys, Travis Jones, who you mentioned. The pressure aspect to me is huge because the Ravens, their sack numbers, in week 1, they had 3 sacks. They won. In week 2, they had 1 sack. They lost. In week 3, they had 3 sacks. They won. In week 4, they had 1 sack. They lost. So the sacks are a bit, and the pressure has been there for the most part, but it's the finishing ability, getting the quarterback down. I think Baltimore has to make Joe Burrow uncomfortable in that pocket and really force him to make decisions that I don't think he would make with maybe a sped up clock in order to really get a handle on this game early.
I think, just looking back real quickly at the previous week, I just think that third down production, getting guys off the field, and if it is a quarterback hurry that causes the punt team to, get on the field, then hallelujah. If it's a scenario where you're looking at just pressure and that pressure, winds up working in their favor because of Joe Burrow being able to, slip outside of it. That was one of the things that I noticed, in last year's games and matchups is that, you would have Joe Burrow dead to rights, but then he's just slippery enough to get away. That was frustrating. And I think that's something that, this year you got to really hone in on getting to Joe Burrow. there are going to be opportunities to get to Joe Burrow. You have to make him pay. You have to if you expect to win this game.
Yeah, and I think a big X factor in this game. I know we've kind of labeled him as this before, but I think Kyle Hamilton is going to be a big X factor in this game. And I know for the first round pedigree, the 14th overall pick, I think he is ascended so far, right? Obviously had a little iffy start to the year, week 2 miscommunications, but then came back in week 3. I think also like this rookie class in general. There's a question here from Ravens fan 17. How has your perception of the rookie class been altered or stayed the same from the preseason to now? And look, I think we're starting to see some of these guys really come into their own. It takes an adjustment period, though. Like even now, even in week 5, these guys are still going to be adjusting. So with Kyle Hamilton,
Absolutely.
with Pepe Williams, Jalen Armour Davis, some of these defensive guys. Offensively, we talked about Daniel Faalele, but Q, how big of an impact do you think Kyle Hamilton has to make in this game? Because I think if they can get him on the field in certain packages, he could really make an impact.
Yeah, I think there are times where, like the New England game, sure, made a mega impact play that helped the team win by punching the ball out of Aguilar's hand. You look at this game and you can see where there were times where he and his fellow defender were kind of looking at each other, and it looks like he was getting scolded because he wasn't feeling like he was in the right place. So there's some up and down, and part of that up and down basically is you're a rookie. There's a lot on your plate. But if you also look at there's a lot on your plate and you're a rookie, 2 different positions, but Linderbaum is doing quite well, and he is the center. So there's a lot on his plate as far as communication and making sure everybody's on the same page. I just think that if I were to grade it out the first quarter of the season, I think it's like a C minus. There are some things that he did, and like I said in that Patriots game, that really showed up. But there were some other plays that shoulda, coulda, would have been had that were missed out on in all the other games that I kind of look at and like, yeah, could have done better, and we expect better. We expect more.
Yes, and I think, other guys who the perceptions, we haven't really seen a ton from Travis Jones, obviously him coming back from the injury, just working his way back in there. And some of these other guys as well, maybe you just want to see a bit more from. But again, there is still such an adjustment period coming over from the college game, especially, you're playing fast in regular season games. I think that's really, really big. But Q, in terms of predictions and how you think this game will go, I think this is a massive game for multiple reasons. One, obviously coming off the tough loss to Buffalo, you just want to bounce back anyway. But 2, this is a team that went 1-5 in their division last year. Very uncharacteristic, I'd say, for the Ravens. And I know that there has been so much about this game, and I know when this was first put on the calendar, so many people were looking forward to it. But these now are both 2-2 teams who are looking, and I still think will be the 2 battling it out for the division crown in the AFC North. The North hasn't looked particularly strong this year, but I still think that those 2 teams will be able to find a way to bounce back in terms of their seasons. But this is the first stepping stone, I feel like, for the Ravens if they really want to get back on track here. I think adjustments are going to be big, halftime adjustments specifically. Obviously the second half has been, I'd say, iffy at points for the Ravens during this year. So how do you see this game going against a very, very talented Cincinnati team?
Again, as you said, that second half coming out, I think if there was ever a word, if I was a leader in that locker room, I'm like, yo, energy, bro, let's bring the energy. Hey, let's bring the energy. And I would keep saying it till you get annoyed, but it's going to get annoyed right down into your being, the very fibers of your soul. So when you go out there, you're ready to play, you're ready to ball out and show up in the second half. I think we haven't seen 4 quarters of football from this Ravens defense. We want to see 4 quarters of football. What does that even mean? Not giving up big plays, not looking at one another because you miscommunicated, not a silly penalty. Being held accountable for your actions, and guys going out there and balling, period, for 4 quarters. I think that's something that can turn the tide in the Ravens' favor.
Yeah. So are you picking a Ravens victory, or are you picking them to go 2-3?
No, I think this is interesting. I think for whatever reason, Cincinnati owns the Baltimore Ravens. I think this is a head scratcher. This is a tough one for me to say. I could see the Ravens being 2-3 after this game, and Cincinnati getting in and sneaking out a victory versus the Ravens. I'm hoping I'm wrong. At the same time, maybe this will be a little reverse psychology.
Yeah, right. You got the reverse jinx going. It's funny. You picked Buffalo to lose, and I picked Buffalo to win last week. This time, I'm picking Cincinnati to lose, and you're picking Cincinnati to win. Yeah, it's funny because last year the Bengals had the Ravens number. Absolutely, it was domination all fronts. It was not fun to remember if you're a Ravens fan. But before then, the Ravens act like Lamar Jackson was dominating the Bengals, and it was like, oh, all right. Well, it's why I think last year was such a shock. It was because, oh wow, like Bengals come out of nowhere. They obviously have their season. So I'm thinking the Ravens are going to get up for this game. They understand what happened last year was embarrassing. It was embarrassing for them to have what happened to them last year against a division team that usually, at least before last year, they've been pretty successful against. So I'm going to say Ravens win. I'll go 28-24. I think Lamar Jackson will get back on track. I think, and to the Baltimore defense's credit, they played well against Buffalo, all things considered. Holding Josh Allen at 23 points in that Bills offense, somewhat impressive. Not a lot of teams can say they did that, but I think it's, again, what you mentioned. Can we see it for 4 quarters? Can we see the consistency, the no miscommunications, no missed tackles, no blown leads? That's the key point. So with hopefully a better pass rush and obviously the secondary, I think continuing to really get their stride with each week that passes, I'll go Ravens 28 and I'll go Bengals 24 here for a Ravens victory. But Q, I appreciate you so much here. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts here before we head out?
No, I was going to say, if I'm going to put up a score, I'm going to say, yeah, both teams go over 30. I think it'll be more 33-30 Bengals with the victory.
All right, shootout here. Hopefully we'll get a Justin Tucker magic and it'll be 33-30 Ravens, but I like the reverse jinx psychology Q's putting out there. But yeah, I'll go 28-24 me for the Ravens, and Q's going 33-30 for the Bengals. But Q, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for hopping on. And yeah, hopefully the Ravens will be 3-2 after this game. In week 6, the Ravens will be facing off against a familiar foe, well, multiple familiar faces there in Don Martindale and the many Giants who are now on that Giants team.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think this right now is front and center. You got to get momentum. Got to go ahead against your Bengals opponent before you can even think about going up against an NFC opponent. And who cares about Wink? It's about those players. And I know he's going to be excited and going up against them in Giants Stadium and all that. But bottom line is you got to take care of the Bengals at home.
Yeah, big conference game, big divisional game. The Ravens have lost 2 pretty big conference games already, so hopefully they can get back on track here with not just that conference win, but a big divisional win here. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here on Monday, we'll be reviewing everything that happened in that Ravens and Bengals Week 5 matchup with a full game recap, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Now we'll see you back here on Monday.